Okay, so let's just start off with a review of how to checkmate with a queen and king versus a king. All right. Okay, so we had multiple steps in our process of how we were gonna checkmate with against this king, right? But first, what we wanted to do was force this king, or like what we need to think of is force the opponent's king into one, right? Like not the corners, the like sides. So like anywhere along here. We need the king to go to one of these rows, right? So like here to here, or here to here, or here to here, or here to here. Okay? So we need the king to go somewhere along here because that'll make it a lot easier to checkmate. All right. So mainly, if we can get it anywhere on these like side squares, it's good. But if we can get it into the corners, it makes it super easy because we just have. The process is just you just bring the king and checkmate. But let's start with how are we going to first checkmate our first step in the process of pushing the opponent's king to the corners, right? Let's just say we want the king to go this way. So we don't need to choose a corner at the beginning. We could just choose one side. So I want the king to go to this side. So from here to here. Somewhere along here. That's where I want the king to go. Okay? Now let's say if I want to do that, then what I'm gonna do is I am going to use some a method called the cutoff method. And the reason it's called the cutoff method is because it forces your the opponent's king so it can't like cross. So I'll just show you what it looks like real quick. Uh, so you see this, right? These two pieces might move away. I think that's the way I described it to you guys. You want the queen and knight move away from the opponent's king. And if this is like that, the king can't go up or it can't cross this wall that the queen puts up, right? Now the king can't run across this way, right? And we want that to happen because now the king is confined to these three files. Ian? Exactly. That's the really good way to put it. So you basically, yeah, you want to squeeze the king until it's forced into the corner. All right. So that's what we wanted, right? So now just keep on using this process. So you see the opponent's king, then you want to choose a like um what is it like corner row that you want the king to go to, right? And then you put your queen a knight move away from the opponent's king. So let's say I put the queen here. This is a knight move away, right? So now this queen blocks this entire row. So the king is forced down, and that means it's going to this row. So that's how you know what knight move you should make with the queen. So then the king is forced into the row you want. So let's say I was talking about this, right? So now this queen is blocking this entire row. So that means the king is forced this way. So into this row. So that is how you choose and play the knight move away for the king to move to. So let's just look at one more example. What if the queen went here? Now, what is covering this entire file, right? So, which way is the king forced to go to? Up, down, right, or left? If you know the answer, just raise your hand. Uh, Aryan? Oh, wait. Yeah, just ignore that the king is here, by the way. I don't. Okay, so Aryan says left. Does anybody else want to give an answer? Anu? Okay, so Anu says down. Alright, so both of you are in a way correct. So once you put the queen here, the king can go left or down, right? But eventually, like let's say the king keeps going down. So you see how I just keep giving these knight moves away? Now it's starting to go left, right? So it's both left and down. So now you saw how it went to the corner, right? Before it was over here. So if you know your directions, if this is west and this is south, then this is southwest, right? It's like a middle of both left and down. So that's like that. So yeah, both of you are in a way correct. Alright, so now we've learned how to use the knight move away method, right? So slowly, the king, if you just keep using these knight moves and you choose the row that you want the king to move to. So if the king wants to move to this row, then we block it off like this, so the king is forced to that side of the board, right? Ian, do you have a question? Okay. Okay. Alright, so now the queen is blocking this entire row and the king is slowly forced this way, right? But now, once the king is a corner, never do an I move away, okay? This is just very important. If the king is in any of these four corners, never put your queen on I move away. Do you know why? What happens now? What is this? Why is this not allowed? Arian? Okay. And Ian? Well, kind of. So, in this case, now, does everybody here know? We all know that the point of chess is to win, right? We want to win the game, right? But, there's three results that are possible: a win, a loss, but there's also a draw, right? Now, a draw, it can happen in many ways. So, like, let's think of win as one, loss as zero, and then draw as one half, right? Like half of one. So, if we think of it like that, then there's multiple ways to draw. So, a draw is something that's possible when you do something called repetition, which is where you like move the same piece again and again. Like, let's say I just kept doing this. Just like keep moving the same squares. Now that's one way to draw, okay? Repetition. Now a second way to draw, which is what we're looking at right here, is called stalemate, okay? And stalemate is when you like aren't attacking the opponent's king, so it's not a check. So like this is not a check right now, right? But the opponent's king nor any of his other pieces. So like let's say he had a pawn somewhere else. Like over here, let's say there's a pawn, it wouldn't be stalemate because the pawn can still move. But if only, let's say in this case there's only the king, right? Can the king move here? No. Can the king move here? No. Can the king move here? No. So the king is stuck in the corner, and if it can't move, this is stalemate. And a stalemate is only half of win. But if we want to win the game, we need to like not get a draw, right? So we need to give him this one square because right now the king can't go here or here because the queen is blocking, but the king can go here. So we'll just keep giving him this square. So allow him to like move back and forth. It's not gonna hurt us in any way, right? That's why we don't want the to get a draw using doing this because this is really bad. We're up a queen, so we should be winning this game. All right. So does everybody understand what a draw is and how we draw? Yeah. Okay. So now when the king is forced into this last corner, we know that we don't want to give a knight move away, right? Because now the king's in a corner. But then what do we do instead? So instead, what we do now is just leave the queen, okay? Don't even touch the queen at all. And just bring the king. Just move your king closer to the opponent's king. And then, when they're directly in front of each other like this, okay, the two kings are directly in front of each other with one square in between, okay, like this. Then you put the queen right in between those. And this is always going to be checkmate, no matter what. Let's say the king was here and the opponent's king was here. Just put your queen on this square and it'll be checkmate. Yeah, like that. So this is the simplest and the most effective way to checkmate using a queen. Alright, so first we choose a side that we want the king to push to. Then we used a queen knight move away to force the king into that like side. And so we just keep repeating those queen moves away, right? Right? And then once the king is in the corner, then we start to bring our king. So then we just bring our king closer. And then when the two kings are directly in front of each other, you put the queen in between the two kings, and now it's checkmate. Because the king protects the queen, and the queen is attacking the other king, and the king can't move anywhere because the queen is guarding all of those squares. Alright? So, does everybody understand the queen checkmate? Alright, good. Nice. Okay, and if you guys ever have any questions, you can send me an email, but I'll also be keeping this recording because I'm recording this right now. I'll send this recording. It'll be on a YouTube link because some parents have emailed me saying it's the link isn't working when I send it, like the recording. So I'm gonna be sending on YouTube from now on, so because I'm pretty sure it'll work very easily for that, and I'll just send you guys the YouTube link. All right? Okay, so now we've learned about the queen checkmate. So now let's look at the second basic checkmate that we need to learn so that we can move on, alright? And this is the two rooks checkmate. Okay, so checkmating with two rooks is slightly different. So, because we have like an extra piece, right? Of two rooks instead of just one queen. Okay, but this is something pretty cool about the two rooks checkmate is that we don't actually need to use the king. So, use our king at least. So this king is going to be kind of useless. So these two rooks instead are going to be the only ones doing the checkmate. Alright? So what the checkmate that we're going to use for two rooks is called the ladder checkmate. Alright? And it's called the ladder checkmate because it's like climbing a ladder. It's just the same step again and again, and then you reach the end goal. There's nothing changed, right? Because in the queen checkmate, remember, we need to choose a corner to force the king into, then we needed to do the knight move away, then we needed to bring the king, and then all of those multiple steps, right? Two rooks checkmate, it's a lot more simple. You just bring the two rooks, and then slowly ladder up, and then you'll get a checkmate. And I'll show you what that looks like. So in the two rooks checkmate, there's two jobs, okay? So one rook is always going to be the rook that does the cut off. So this is a similarity, right? We learned about, does anybody remember why we have a cutoff? What is the use of a cut off? What does this not allow the opponent to do? Sanjeevi? Exactly. Good job. So now this king, it can't go across, right? It can't go to this row that the rook is on because the rook is defending that square, and it can't go across. So that means it only has these many, like, some number of files left, right? So that's the job of one rook. Then the other rook, it is going to be the rook that gives the check. So if we have the two rooks like this, then we want this rook to be the cutoff, right? Because we want to, once again, we do have to choose a file that we want the king to force to. Like we talked about how there's the four corner files, right? Like these four corners. Now we need the king to go to one of these files. So let's say, and most of the time in this kind of position, it's pretty easy to tell which one's the easiest to push the king into. Like this, we already have the rook cutting off this way, so that means the king is forced to the right. All right. So now we have this rook cutting off. Now this rook is going to give a check, and the only check here. Now this rook is giving a check. Now the king can't run this way because this rook is cutting off, right? That means the king is forced this way, right? Now, this is the cool thing about the 2x checkmate. Once they have these two jobs, remember, back here, this rook was the cut off, right? It was cutting off, and this rook was giving the check. But now the roles switch. Now this rook is going to cut off, and the rook that was being the cut off rook before is now going to give the check. Alright? Does that make sense? This rook is giving the check, this rook is cutting off, so the king can't run. Right? Alright. So now, let's just keep doing that again. Now, uh, which rook? This one? I'll just like highlight it. The blue rook or the red rook? Which one should be given? Which one is the cut off? Which one is going to be the one that cuts off the king? Nicholas? Okay, so Nicholas says the red rook is going to cut off. Now, is there anybody having a different answer? No? Well, actually, in this case, this blue rook is going to be the one that cuts off. Because you see, it's like the one that's closest to the king, right? Usually, this is the easiest way to tell if it's the cutoff rook or the rook that's supposed to give the check. It's the one that's closest to the king. So this rook, it has two files, right? So it's like one file, two files, right? Because that's the file that the king is on. This rook only has one file. This one is always going to be the cutoff rook. And like, look, we saw in this case, this rook is one file, right? Because the king is on this file, and the rook is on this file, so only one square. But this is 1, 2. So the rook that's closest to the king in terms of the files, that is going to be the cutoff rook. And then the rook that is a bit further away, that's going to be the checking rook. And now the roles reverse, right? So this rook is going to be cutting off, and this rook is going to give a check. Now, in this case, which rook is going to be the checking rook? The blue or the red? Which rook will give the check? Nicholas? Yeah, good job. So, right, because now I told you that this rook, since it's closest to the king in terms of the file, it's going to give the cutoff. But that means the blue rook is going to go here and give the check. Now, again, this rook is going to give the check because this rook is closest. That means it's cutting off. And finally, when the king is at the end of the board, you just do the process one more time. This rook is cutting off because it's closest. This rook gives the check, but now the king doesn't have anywhere to go because you can't exactly run out of the board, right? Like you can't go to the I file. There's no I file, right? So the king can't run that way, and the king can't go this way because the rook is blocking. All right? So that is the basic method of how to checkmate with two rooks. So does anybody have any questions on that? So you'll notice that throughout all of this, has the king moved even one time? Our king hasn't moved at all, right? See, look, this king is just staying stationary. And that is something that's important about the two rooks checkmate, is that the king, it never is going to move, our king. Because these two rooks, they're strong enough to checkmate by themselves. They don't need the help of the king. Alright? Oh, oh yeah, Ian? Well, yeah, it is possible to checkmate with one rook. And we're gonna look at that next. How to checkmate with a rook and a king. And Nicholas? Yeah, it's kind of like a pattern, right? So it's just like a zigzag. So, oh, I think that's yeah, you reminded me. So to do this checkmate, you need the rooks in this diagonal position. They're one square like diagonal, right? Just like this. And this is the easiest way. Like if this rook was here, it'd still like be pretty easy, but it's a bit more difficult. If you just have the two rooks like this, exactly diagonal to each other, it makes it super easy to just move zigzag and give a checkmate. So it's kind of like a pattern. The two rooks are just moving like this, and then they'll checkmate. Here, then here, then here, then here, then here, finally there. And it's like a zigzag pattern that they make throughout the board. And it makes for a really easy checkmate. Alright? So now we're going to learn about a special case. So what if, so you saw here, now this, the opponent kind of just let himself be checkmated, right? He just like kept moving his king along the side, like knowing that he'll be checkmated. But the opponent can try and fight back. So instead, what he can do is, let's say in this position, now the king is closer to the rooks, right? And instead of being all the way down here, it's now up here. So it can try and attack the rooks. So once again, in this position, which rook is the cutoff rook? If you know the answer, raise your hand. Anu? Okay, so Anu says the blue rook is the cutoff rook. Does anybody have a different answer? Nicholas? Yeah, it was blue. So uh, Anu was correct. So, sorry. This rook is the one that is the cutoff rook because it's closest to the king, right? That means the other rook is going to be the one giving the check. But now, in our previous examples, we saw that the king, like back here, it was just running along the edge, right? And that's not really useful for black. But in this case, what we're going to look at is, what if the king moves up, tries to go after the rook? So now in this case, we have this rook being the cutoff, and the other rook, this rook, is going to give the check. So now we have check. And now, what if the king goes here? Okay, now it's attacking this rook. Okay? So what if now? Why is this a bad move? Why shouldn't I give a check? This rook is giving a check, and this rook is cutting off, right? But what's the problem in this case? What can black do? Sanjeevi? The blue or the red? Which rook? Exactly. So this king can take the um this rook, right? And now this checkmating with a king and a rook is a lot more difficult than checkmating with just two rooks. So let's try not to do that. Instead, we should just move the rook to the other side. Okay? So that is our strategy. So now we had our strategy. What if the king just ran along the side, right? We just keep giving zigzag checks and then we'll just checkmate at the end, right? But now, what if the king tries to fight back and go and attack one of our rooks? So what we do is, we do still keep the zigzag, right? We kept the zigzag like this. But once the king is attacking one of our rooks, don't defend the rook because it makes it a lot more difficult and tedious. So instead, what we'll do is just move the rook to the other side of the board. So the king, it's on this side, right? Like around this area, like somewhere around here. So just move it all the way down. Now it's going to take another long journey to try and attack, and it's going to be super annoying, right? So now our rook came all the way down here. So what if the king now see look, it's still cutting off, right? That's why we don't want to move the king back here. If we go here, there's nothing to cut the king off. So like all of these squares, they're now unguarded, right? So the king can run back. and that's gonna make it even more difficult. So instead, what we want to do, keep it in the same file. So file is the column, right? The letters, they go up and down. And then the rows are the cross or the ranks. That's what we call them in chess. So we want to keep it in the same file. So we go down, and now the king is cut off. Now it can't run across, right? So that's good for us. Now let's say the king moves here. Then we can give a check. Now you saw how in our previous example I told you guys to keep the two rooks diagonal like this, right? But we can still checkmate in this way where we have um, the kings or the two rooks on opposite sides of the board. It still works. It just looks a bit stranger. So see here, now this rook is giving the check, and this rook is the one cutting off, right? So it's the same exact scenario, except the rooks are just in different places. But it shouldn't make too big of a difference. Alright? So now this king, it can't move this way, so it's forced to move back. Now, same principle. Actually, let me just ask this as a question. So which rook is the rook that should give the check? The blue rook or the red rook? Aryan? Okay, so Aryan says the blue rook should give the check. Now, does anybody have a different answer? Remember, use the strategy. Which rook is closest? Nicholas? Why? Why is the red rook giving the check? Good job, exactly. That's the exact reason. So this blue rook, since it's the one that's closest to the king, this is the rook that cuts off. The rook that's a bit further away, this rook, that's gonna give the check. And then the roles reverse, right? Now, this rook closest, so that means that this rook gives the check. But now in this case, what if instead of the king going here, the king goes here? Now if I give a check, what happens? Black can just take our rook, right? Yeah. So there's no point in that. So we'll just make it even harder on ourselves. Instead, what do you guys think is the best move in this case? Remember, what happened over here? What did we do to this rook? So now think about what we should do now. Okay. Anu? Yeah, I'll make it easier. The blue or the red? Okay, the red rook where? Okay, so Anu says rook to g7. Now, does anybody have a different answer? Aryan? So this? Okay, so Aryan says rook h1. How about Nicholas? So, so you're saying rook f7. Alright, so now we have three answers. So let's look at them one by one. So, rook to g7. The problem with rook to g7 is that this rook is undefended, right? So it can just be taken. Uh, Anu, do you have a question? Which rook? Because both rooks can go to g8. So the rook on g1 or the rook on f8? Which one do you want it to go to g8? Oh yeah. Do you have an answer? All right. Maybe we'll come back to you later. Okay.